Well, hey, this is Ivy Brent Laminack here for my 50th high school reunion. Wrote up some notes on the old days in Bremen. Bremen was at a double crossroads of intersection of 27 and 78, north-south and east-west. And similarly for the railroads. Southern Railway went east and west. This was the main line between Atlanta and Birmingham. The other railway here was the Central of Georgia. Central of Georgia originally went from Savannah to Macon, and then they extended the line up to Noonan, Carrollton, Bremen, Rome, and then on up to Chattanooga. All right. I'm here under the recently built homage to the freight depot. There were actually two freight depots in the crossings of the two freight lines, one southern, one central of Georgia. Southern depot is directly across from where City Hall is now, and central of Georgia was on the other side of the intersection. They had raised platforms so that the platforms would be even with boxcars, where goods would be loaded and unloaded. This is, way before the days of containerized freight. They had passenger service as well. Traditionally, on the last day of third grade, all the kids in Bremen would come down here and would take the train down to Tallapoosa. And our parents would pick us up at the Tallapoosa station, and that was the end of school for the third grade. A couple of years after our ride, Southern discontinued passenger service, and that was the end of that tradition. I was very familiar with the Southern Depot. See, both my parents worked within sight of here. I'll get to that in a second. And I was raised by our next door neighbors, the Davises. We lived at 121 Waddell Street. That's third house on the right past High Towers. And they were our next door neighbors, the Davises, 125 Waddell Street. Mr. Davis, William Eiley Davis, was retired from Southern Railroad. He was the freight agent and telegrapher. Yeah, in the early 1960s, Southern Railway still communicated up and down the line by telegraph. I'd go with Mr. Davis here to the Southern Freight Depot and talk with the freight agent that replaced him. The agent's desk had this huge manual upright typewriter before the days of electric typewriters, and they'd put a sheet of paper in and let me hunt and peck. And there was also the brass telegraph key and the brass sounder. If you've ever heard the telegraph sounder, it's one of the most solid, satisfying clacks in the world. Anyway, they'd short the key to the sounder and let me tap out and make the sounder sound. I tried to learn Morse code years on. I just didn't have the ear for it. Mr. Davis, before he was in radio and telegraphy all his life. Before he worked for Southern, he did radio repair in the neighborhood. He was also a radio operator on ships, before GPS, before voice communications, ships communicated by Morse code. He was on board one ship in the North Atlantic in April 1912. One night, he heard a distress signal from a ship going down. Yeah, he heard the Titanic go down. I don't remember which ship it was on. It may have been the Carpathia. I wish I'd interviewed him, and I wish I'd recorded his remembrance, because that's a lot of history that's lost now. Would have been a unique perspective. I don't think he ever quite got over the sight of all those frozen bodies in the water that night. Anyway, Mr. and Ms. Davis are buried in Hollywood Cemetery in Tallapoosa. At the junction of the town, also my father worked. See, just one side of the Welcome to Bremen sign is a silver equipment case for radio equipment, for the railroad equipment, signals, things like that. That was my father's office. They had he and his business partner, Mr. Bearden, had the Busy Bee taxi service, and they had an old bench seat from a truck or something leaned up against that equipment cabinet. And their office was basically a box on a utility pole next to it, and in the box was a telephone. That's where you call the Busy Bee taxi service, 537-2255. And in inclement weather, they'd sit nearby in their cars, probably parked in front of Lovern's drugstore, which appears to be for sale now. No cell phones, no pagers, no wireless communication, because, remember, telegraph lines. Telegraph was long distance communication. Speaking of across the street in Lovern Pharmacy, I remember the pharmacist, Bobby Lovern. Before I was born, my mother worked there. She worked at the soda fountain. Said they had 3 sizes of ice cream, 5, 10, and 15 cents. And nobody could eat a 15-cent ice cream cone. It's too big. About the most notable happenings is every now and again Susan Hayward would stop by up from Carrollton. But as long as I remembered, my mother worked at Hubbard's. Now it's the side of the hub, which you can see just beyond there. Still see the old cutting room off to the side. Hubbard Company was my first summer job. Our Georgia Converters Incorporated. That's what our paycheck said. I was a bundle boy, pushing around carts of about 30 or so pair of pants that were in the process of being sewn. By today's standards, the shop floor was just a sea of what we would call work in process, or the antithesis of modern lean manufacturing. Just pants on carts as far as the eye could see. Production of Hubbard's was 3,000 pair of men's pants a day. So that's about 100 carts into and out of the line every day. 100 carts pushed from each station to the next as people sewed. As each operator sewed, they clipped out a ticket showing how many pair of pants it was and stapled it to their worksheet. They got paid a base pay plus piecework of how many tickets they sewed. All right. I worked at department number 11. Supervisor Ms. Laminack. Yeah, I had to work for my mom. Department 11 was the last department. It was belt loops and buttonholes. And then the pants went from there to be inspected and to the stock room. Fire shock, all right? And since it was the last stop on the line, it's also my job to turn the buggies upside down and clean the matted threads out from the wheels so they would roll well. So Bremen was the clothing center of the South. Hubbard's and all the various permutations of the Sewell family ran garments, ran clothing. Trouble with that is the monoculture. When the garment industry offshored and due to NAFTA and a lot of it moved to Mexico and Central America, Bremen just about dried up and blew away. Fortunately, it's doing better now. I think the latest census shows it's up to 7,200 2, 3, 4, 500, something like that. As I recall, the population was about 3,500 back in my day. Now, trouble with the monoculture. I was talking to one of the old timers, Gene Cook, whose wife's name was Gene Cook. Called him He Gene and She Gene. I was talking to He Gene, and He Gene said it didn't have to be that way. He said the garment industry was largely a female industry, largely women working the sewing machines. Occasional man working the presses, working in the cutting room, things like that. The men had to work elsewhere. They'd work on the pipelines, or maybe down Southwire. A lot of them had to go further afield to Lockheed in Marietta, or Doraville or Hapeville assembly plants making cars. That was quite a commute back then, before there was the interstate. But Gene said, there was probably room in the town for more male industries, machinists, heavy industries, mechanical assemblies, things like that. But anyway, the town fathers didn't want that. They thought it would drive up the cost of labor, so that didn't happen. But it looks like Bremen is more diversified now. I see a lot of people working at the bypass and I-20 and food service and hospitality industries. I guess there's probably more healthcare now as my generation ages. Still some gaps in downtown. The smile of downtown is a little snaggletooth at the moment, but it looks like it's going through better days now. Saw the new high school, new gym last night, Performing Arts Center that came about a few years ago. Yeah, the glory days of the garment industry are past, but looks like Bremen's doing okay. I'm glad I'm from here. Thanks.